This story doesn't begin with an explorer who had a plan to conquer the world. It begins with a woman in East Africa, more than 70,000 years ago, running after her child because the herd had moved on and the nearest waterhole was drying up. By the end of this story, her descendants will have settled on every continent on Earth except Antarctica, without a compass, without a map, without a single written word to explain how any of it was done. So how does a family with nothing but its own 2 feet end up on every landmass on the planet? It starts with something almost embarrassingly simple. This woman didn't set off because she was curious about the horizon. She followed resources, migrating herds, seasonal plants, and moved away from places where local food had run out. In her own lifetime, she probably covered only a few hundred kilometers, but her daughter went a little further, and her daughter's daughter went further still. Over hundreds of generations, that slow drift added up to staggering total distances. This was never one heroic march from Africa to Australia. It was a slow, multi-generational wave, pushing the edge of familiar territory outward generation after generation, in search of better hunting grounds, more reliable water, or simply more room as the group grew. But following resources on foot only gets you so far, unless your body happens to be built exactly for it. And that's exactly the advantage this family carried with them. Upright walking, an unusually efficient sweating system, the capacity for sustained, moderate effort over long stretches of time. All of it meant that covering 15 to 30 kilometers a day with supplies wasn't some extraordinary feat. It was simply a normal day for bodies conditioned for exactly this from childhood. A capable body will still get you killed in unfamiliar terrain, though, without one thing. And this is where the story gets genuinely remarkable. What carried this family safely through unknown land, without getting lost, without running out of water, without walking straight into danger, was an enormous body of practical environmental knowledge. Reading a landscape, spotting water by the plants growing nearby or the way animals behaved, recognizing regional weather patterns. None of this was figured out by one person on one journey. It was generations of accumulated observation, passed down by word of mouth. Knowledge that let this family move through unfamiliar territory with far more confidence than a modern person, dropped into the same place with zero preparation, could ever manage. Eventually, all that walking led this family to the edge of the continent itself, and to a crossing that changed everything. Genetic and archaeological evidence shows this family left Africa through specific corridors, including a crossing at the Bab el-Mandeb Strait between the Horn of Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. During certain Ice Age climate periods, lower sea levels made that strait considerably narrower and easier to cross than it is today. This family wasn't relying on willpower and endurance alone. They were taking advantage of favorable environmental conditions, narrower water crossings, exposed land bridges during glacial periods, shortcuts that simply don't exist under today's conditions. And nowhere does that shortcut matter more than in the story of how an entire hemisphere got settled, without a single boat. Thousands of years and countless generations later, this family had spread across much of Asia. During the last ice age, as enormous amounts of water were locked away in ice sheets, global sea levels dropped and exposed a wide stretch of land connecting Siberia and Alaska, a region now called Beringia. This family didn't need a boat to reach the Americas. They simply kept following the herds eastward, across ordinary walkable ground in a place that is open ocean today. That one geographic feature explains an enormous amount of how an entire hemisphere was settled, a hemisphere that, under modern sea levels, would require sophisticated maritime technology to even reach. Not every branch of this family got such an easy shortcut, though. One branch faced a challenge that no land bridge could solve, and had to invent something extraordinary to meet it. Another branch of this widely scattered family eventually faced the open Pacific. Double-hulled outrigger canoes carried entire founding populations, along with plants and breeding animals, across vast stretches of open ocean to settle new islands permanently. This wasn't accidental drifting. The deliberate loading of breeding stock and seed plants tells us these voyages were planned. These people expected to find land, and they intended to stay. Finding land no one had ever seen shouldn't have been possible without instruments. And yet, this family found a way, one that still leaves modern researchers amazed. Their navigation relied on years of trained, orally transmitted observation, star patterns, the shape and direction of ocean swells, cloud formations, even the flight behavior of specific seabird species that returned each night to fixed nesting islands. Skilled navigators in this family could reportedly sense the presence of an island they couldn't yet see, purely from subtle changes in the wave pattern around them, a level of sensitivity that modern researchers, even with deliberate training, have struggled to fully replicate. And the outrigger canoe was only one answer to a question this family kept solving again and again in completely different ways, all over the world. The outrigger was just one of many boat technologies this family invented independently in different places. Other branches built reed boats around the Mediterranean and in parts of South America, dugout canoes carved from single tree trunks across countless river and coastal cultures, and lightweight, skin-covered frame boats in northern and Arctic regions where wood was scarce. No single invention spread out from one origin point. This was countless regional solutions, each one shaped precisely by its own environment. But one crossing made by this same family long before any of those Pacific voyages remains one of the most puzzling mysteries in all of archaeology. Even at the lowest sea levels of the Ice Age, a significant stretch of open water still separated Southeast Asia from Australia, never exposed as walkable land. And yet, members of this family reached Australia at least 65,000 years ago using some kind of deliberate watercraft, far earlier than the much more famous Polynesian voyaging that came later. Exactly what they used, and how sophisticated their navigation really was, remains a genuinely open question in archaeology today. What's certain is that this family deliberately crossed open water tens of thousands of years before anywhere else in the world has comparable evidence of maritime travel. Back on land, another problem remained. A human body, however well built for walking, can only carry so much. The solution came on 4 legs. Domesticated animals, horses, camels, donkeys, and in some regions llamas, dramatically expanded how far and how fast this family could travel, carrying far more supplies, trade goods, and equipment than muscle power alone ever could. One of those animals deserves special mention because it turned some of the harshest terrain on Earth into a highway. Camels could go far longer without water than most large mammals and tolerated extreme heat that made them indispensable for travel and trade across the Sahara, the Arabian Peninsula, and much of Central Asia. The development of proper camel saddle technology, balancing rider and cargo securely, was a major innovation in its own right. It turned camels from useful pack animals into genuinely efficient long-distance desert transport, opening trade routes across terrain that would otherwise have been brutally difficult to cross. And once goods could move that far, something even bigger started happening. Connections between people who never met at all. Some of this family's long-distance movement had nothing to do with resettlement. It was trade, goods moving repeatedly across vast distances through chains of intermediaries, connecting communities that never had direct contact with each other. Archaeologists regularly find specific stones, shells, and other distinctive materials hundreds or even thousands of miles from where they originated. Proof that these trade networks existed far earlier and reached far further than most people assume. None of this worked, though, without something far less visible than boats or camels, and far harder to build. A successful long-distance journey needed more than a strong body and good environmental knowledge. It needed careful group planning, shared resource management, and coordinated decision-making among multiple people. This was never a story of individual endurance alone. It was a genuinely collective achievement built on trust and cooperation within the whole traveling group. And that cooperation mattered because the honest truth is, this story has a much darker side than most retellings admit. Not every journey succeeded. Long-distance travel into unfamiliar territory carried real risk. Starvation, dehydration, unfamiliar disease, conflict with people already living there, simple, fatal misjudgment of the terrain. The fact that this family eventually settled nearly every habitable continent doesn't mean every attempt worked. It means a considerable number of attempts failed, sometimes catastrophically, and only the successful journeys left behind the archaeological and genetic evidence we can study today. Even the journeys that did succeed depended on getting one more thing right, something as simple as picking the correct week to leave. Long-distance travel across difficult terrain or open water required careful attention to seasonal weather, not a random departure whenever the idea struck. Polynesian voyaging in particular shows clear evidence of seasonal planning, time to take advantage of predictable winds and currents. Exactly the kind of accumulated environmental knowledge that made everything else in this story possible. Not every route required a boat built for the open ocean, though. Sometimes the easiest road was already there, flowing downhill. River systems were one of the most practically important, most underappreciated travel corridors in this family's history. Rivers offered reliable water, easier terrain than the surrounding forest or mountains, and, once boat technology caught up, a way to cover far more ground with far less effort than walking. Major river systems like the Nile, the Tigris and Euphrates and the Indus didn't just support the farming civilizations we associate with them. They functioned as genuine highways, moving people, goods, and ideas across entire regions. And while some branches of this family followed rivers toward comfort, another branch was heading somewhere that offered none at all. Other branches of this family eventually settled the Arctic and subarctic. Extreme cold, seasonally scarce food, conditions that would be lethal without exactly the right clothing, shelter knowledge, and travel technique. The development of sled technology, often paired with dogs specifically bred and trained for pulling, was a major innovation built precisely for this environment, allowing efficient travel where ordinary walking or pack animals simply wouldn't work. Cold wasn't the only extreme this family had to outthink. In the driest places on Earth, the real enemy was something far more basic. For travel through arid regions, this family developed various water storage solutions, treated animal skins, specially shaped gourds, and eventually ceramic vessels engineered to minimize evaporation. Knowledge of reliable water sources along established routes, carefully memorized and passed down across generations, was often the difference between a journey that succeeded and one that didn't. None of this, though, is something we simply took on faith. There's a reason we can trace this family's path with such confidence today. Genetic research has made it possible to reconstruct this family's migration routes with a level of precision that archaeological evidence alone could never provide, since physical remains rarely survive intact across such enormous timescales. In several documented cases, genetic markers have confirmed and sharpened migration timelines that earlier archaeological evidence could only estimate roughly. And that brings us to the one thing that made every single part of this story possible in the first place. None of it happened because of one brilliant idea, discovered once and instantly applied everywhere. It happened through countless individual pieces of practical knowledge, which plants signal water nearby, how to read approaching weather in the clouds and the wind, how to build a boat that can survive open ocean swells, observed, tested, refined, and passed down to the next generation, who refined it further still. This family didn't spread across nearly the entire planet because of one brilliant invention or one heroic journey. They did it through patiently accumulated knowledge, careful observation of the world around them, and the simple, stubborn decision to walk or sail just a little further than the generation before them ever had. And if you're watching this right now, you're living proof that journey never actually stopped.